And welcome to the next session of the What Works in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion conference. I'm Joe Murphy, Director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy. And I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that the lands on which we live, work, celebrate, and heal here at Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio, are the ancestral homelands of the Miami and Lenape, Wyandot, and Shawnee peoples, among others. The disputed Treaty of Greenville and the forced removal of indigenous peoples from this region allowed for the founding of the college in the early 1800s. As a community, we are committed to confronting this dark past while also embracing, through education and outreach, the many indigenous communities that continue to thrive in Ohio. This is one of our 3 presenter sessions. So we'll begin with, we'll use the schedule as it appears on the agenda. So we'll begin, if it's all right, with Marie Snipes and her presentation, Student Self-Assessment of Participation.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks all of you for coming. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen. I set up a few slides so that you could all kind of follow along with the assessment that I implemented. So this is something that I started this past year. And the reason is that I've always had a participation as a component of my classes. So I teach mathematics at Kenyon, and I've always put participation in because, as we all know, that's such an important part of learning. And in learning mathematics, it's not something that you're learning by watching. It's something that you need to actively engage with and solve problems in order to deeply understand the material. And so I've always felt that, okay, you should put credit towards a grade on what's important for learning. And so I would have these maybe 10% of the grade on participation. So let me go ahead and try to screen share here. And I just set up a few slides so that you could follow along with some of the things. Is this working?
We see your full PowerPoint.
Okay, great. So I will click on, there we go. Okay. So as I said, this is something I've always done. And then the question becomes, well, how do you actually do that assessment? And so the things that I used to consider were the following things that you can read there. You know, did students come to class? Did they answer questions? Did they play along when I would have, you know, group handouts? And in some classes, I have structured presentations. So maybe how many presentations did they volunteer for? Did they prepare for those? And so, okay, that seems all right. But I've started to become more and more concerned about this kind of assessment of participation, and for the following reasons that I have. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to get this to keep moving. Somehow okay, there we go. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the issue here, one issue that I came across is, okay, now that I have, you know, these things I'm going to consider, how important are those, right? Like if somebody is talking a lot in class, but then they don't come to 3 classes, is that, you know, how does that weigh against? How do I balance that out? And perhaps more seriously, the last 2 bullets on this slide here are, you know, there's a lot of evidence that, you know, certain people from marginalized groups or people that are not, you know, traditionally represented as well in mathematics, in my case, you know, may not feel as comfortable speaking up. You know, the students that perhaps are always volunteering answers are getting more visibility in my mind. And so as I'm kind of trying to assess participation, perhaps I'm just passing along these biases. And so this is really what was concerning me. And I tried to think about ways that might be remedied. So what I landed on last semester, and has really worked well for many reasons, that I'll talk about, is a self-assessment where students would think about their own participation. And I, at the outset, I had these 3 purposes for the students. And this is what I actually told them in the introduction to the survey. So it's basically a survey that I gave them that asked them questions to kind of reflect about what they contributed to the class and what they were taking out of the class. So I tried to market it as, you know, something where they could think about their role in the class. I wanted this to give them some agency and a sense of, you know, that this is something they completely control. And then also, you know, insights for future classes. And then, you know, the third and equally important aspect of this is that I wanted to be able to equitably assess whether their participation, you know, whether they're participating. I told them at the outset also that I actually don't know how well they're participating, because I can't really see what's in their head and what they're thinking about and what they're struggling with. And I think that that's an important part of participating. You know, we don't always participate by live streaming our thoughts. And so, I wanted a way to actually give them a chance to tell me how well they were engaged in class activities. And so along with that intro, I also gave them these expectations here. I told them I wanted thoughtful, honest responses. And I emphasized a lot that, you know, this component of their grade is, I don't expect perfection, right? And so you can get 100% on this without having 100% perfect, you know, responses. You don't have to, there's not a checkbox or something I'm looking for here. What I want to see is them assessing themselves and setting goals for themselves. And I also made sure to highlight that there's a lot of ways people can participate, and that it doesn't look the same for everyone. And so that in particular, you know, people don't always feel as confident about volunteering answers to questions I might ask in class. And so I wanted to acknowledge that for the students and normalize that. While encouraging them to speak up if they wanted. So here's the questions. I just thought maybe I would go through the questions and then quickly tell you a few take homes. So I asked them how they did feel, how they prepared. Did they feel prepared? And then I wanted to know what they thought effective participation was. And you know, then they could reflect on whether or not they were effectively participating. And then I asked them to describe what they would do typically. And here was another, a place where I actually kind of suggested parenthetically a bunch of ways that they could participate, that they could think about, so that they don't have to just say, well, I answered, you know, a question every class. And it turns out actually that this, I think this question here turned out to be really useful in hindsight, because it seemed to give students ideas about how they could participate, and get them kind of thinking about other types of ways they could get more involved in the class without me having to specifically say you should try such and such. It just gave them options. I asked them which activities they found easiest to participate in. And then I asked if there were lulls over the semester where they weren't able to participate fully. And here was where I wanted them to maybe come up with suggestions for themselves and maybe things that they could modify in how they approached the class. And I was hoping that this might inspire some changes moving forward. And then I asked them, of course, if they were on time or if they missed classes. And I found one that I got some interesting responses for was, what did you do to learn material from missed classes? I think that I had intended here, we had a lot of COVID related absences. And so it's not something where I can or even want to expect perfect attendance, but part of the expectation is that students will be doing some work after the fact to make sure that they keep up with the material. And so I got some interesting results here. Some students actually just told me that they watched online videos, which I wasn't expecting. But again, that was another opportunity for a conversation. And then I finished up with asking if there were other impediments to participation, and then asking them to just assign themselves a grade. So I know this is a pretty short presentation here, so I just wanted to run through those quickly. And then just to say that overall, the students really took this very seriously. I wasn't sure if I was going to get kind of canned responses, but I was really pleased and proud of kind of the level of self-examination that I could see. And I also found it interesting that students reported different, I mean, okay, it's not unexpected, but students would report that different activities were the ones that they found the easiest to get involved with. And so it really confirmed for me those differences in how students were perceiving the different types of activities, confirmed for me that I should continue to offer that variety. And just because, I get some students saying that they, maybe don't love the computer simulations, that other students are really taking a lot away from those and finding those easier to understand and to participate in. I also found that students actually tended to underestimate their grades. I did actually bump them up if I thought that they were kind of lowballing their estimate. But I thought overall they were very, very candid. And then kind of a surprising finding is that that the process of doing this really did seem to kind of give students ideas for things they could try, and they would sometimes kind of change course a little bit in the way they would in the way they were participating. Maybe it's because of the expectations being very, very explicit. And then I guess a couple of my take-home thoughts here. I think it's probably better to do this maybe twice in the semester, and maybe a slightly modified version at the end of the class. But once fairly early on in the semester, so students have time to really modify how they approach the class. And I also think it's a really good conversation starter, right? So if students are asking or commenting that, well, maybe I should try to do come into office hours, soon after I miss a class, then it's a good chance for me to kind of revisit that with them at the right moment. So I think that was actually all I had on slides. I thought maybe I would leave a little bit of time for questions or observations, or any ideas any of you have to add to this. And go ahead and stop sharing now.
I notice we've got a couple of folks agreeing with the class that it's not just your students who underestimate their participation, especially the stronger students.
Yeah, I found, but interestingly, I mean, I had one student who rated her participation, a calculus student, as a B-. She said she should get an 80%. And I mean, this was a student who, came to class, had the most beautiful presentations when she would get up and talk, but she was just really shy. And so I think students really have this very strong link in their head that, like, the amount of airspace they take up equals, how good they are at participating. And I feel like that's to the detriment of some of the quieter students sometimes. And also the students that do take up all the air sometimes don't hear as much from the others. Amy Jo?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing this. I think it's a really interesting addition to some of the things I've been trying, but I had a question about, it seems like a pretty long set of questions for them. So do you have them do this in class, Or do you ask them to do it outside of class? And then my second question is, how long does it take you to get through it? Because what I found is when I have the students do these participation things, and mine is shorter than yours, I just get, and I have them do it too often. So that is one thing I would say. But I feel like I don't keep up with it often enough to kind of close that feedback loop with them.
Yeah, so I agree. I think so I do give them this to do out of class. I mean, I think it is certainly too long. And I also told them I want them to think about it. So I actually give them several days before I ask for it back, like over a weekend, because I tell them that part of this is the reflection. And then I actually do remind them, like, this is part of your grade, and this is how I want to equitably assess it. And I want to see your candid thoughts. And so they really, they do take the time. Now, I have found, when I first started doing this, it was only at the end of the semester. And then this past semester, I tried doing it kind of mid-semester. It's a little harder. When it's twice, I think the second one should be a very short, it can be shortened quite a lot. The first one, I really wanted it, I think it was very effective at the current length for the first one. I don't think I would do too many more than 2. I think if you were going to do multiple ones, if I was going to do multiple ones in my class anyways, I think I would put maybe just very short check-ins. Do you think you've made improvements? Which of these areas? And then have them do like a checkbox. Are there any, where you've fallen off the wagon or something? Maybe like almost a checkbox kind of thing. Do you think you've gone up or down since the last one? And then, let them give a quick response. And I think the other thing was at the end, I think having sort of a shorter survey at the end also, in part because, if you ask what does effective participation look like to you, you've asked them that, right? And so, I mean, I think last semester what I did is I said, well, has anything changed in your perception of effective participation since the last time around? And I felt like that made it a little bit less canned, because I also feel like if students are getting the same question over and over, then they may not put the same effort into responding, nor should they.
Thank you.
I have a question. So is there room for improvement if they answer this at the end and they seem to not be doing well with participation and their grade isn't looking really well, or they're kind of borderline? Like maybe they're getting, say, a C or a D, and they need a C to pass for their program.
So your question is how to do the assessment, how to kind of evaluate the written document they've turned in?
Yes, or if okay, so if they evaluate themselves and they feel like maybe they aren't doing that well, is there room for improvement at the end?
Yes. So, I mean, I actually ask them to assess what they've done throughout the course, right? So at least for me, I would ask them for their honest assessment of their grade. And if it seems reasonable, then I just use that. So, if somebody told me that I should give them 100 out of 100 for, but they, and in their reflection, the reflection didn't match that, and my observation of their participation was very far from 100. So I don't also want them all to say I need 100%. I want them to kind of think about, okay, well, what was it really valued at, and what did they think? And if it seemed honest, I said I would go ahead and use it. And so, a lot of people will put, okay, I think I had kind of B participation. I missed some classes. I did these things. I would have liked to I should have gone to office hours more. I could have prepared differently. I don't, tally those things up and hold that against them or anything. I'll just use what they think their overall participation was.
Right.
And I might bump it up by a couple of points if I think that maybe the assessment was really, really insightful. But I mean, I think for me, it's more about giving the students the agency here, right? I mean, if this is about their participation, I mean, I can't really see your participation. If you have really done and can articulate that you did a participation, even if it didn't quite look like it to me, unless it's really obvious it didn't, then I'm not going to try to split those hairs with 10%.
Okay.
At least
you.
that's how I approached it. It was more about getting their buy-in. And yes, I just saw, Michelle, the question about the slides. Yeah, I'm happy to share them. Joe, would I just send those to you then?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
CIP will share them out after.